Hey everyone, I'm going to spend the next about 15 minutes teaching you how to play game day football. I'm a visual learner. I like watching YouTube videos and then reading rules. It just makes the rules pop more and it makes them make sense in my head. So whether you started with the rules and you're now watching the YouTube video, or you're watching the YouTube video and then the rules, hopefully one or the other really helped you make this come to life and made it clearly and easily to understand. So, game day football, this is the light mode. There's an advanced mode coming in the next couple of weeks, which is going to have season, legacy, campaign play, whatever you want to call it. But this is light mode. This is good for just one-off games. You have 15 minutes to kill. This game takes on average about 15 minutes. So it's nice and light, but it definitely has some strategy. And it is a dice game, but there's lots of dice mitigation, so it's not as lucky as you might think. So the components that you'll need is you need to print off this piece of paper, and then you need 5d6. There's 4 that you're going to have to cut out. Along with the PDF of this. Then you'll have to glue them onto dice, and then there's just 1d6 that you need. These look a little bit bigger because they're actually wooden cubes that I use for a different game called Techno Bowl. It's a really good game. You should check it out. But I have these printed on these. I do have my D6 ready to go. These are getting glued, so they're almost ready. So I will be using these are just regular D6 dice that you can find in Walmart or wherever. So they will fit when you print them out. They will fit a regular size dice. I'm just using these because that's what I was playtesting with. So, game day football, light mode. The goal of the game is to score a touchdown. If you score a touchdown, you win the game. This game is a beat your high score and has a win-loss condition. If you do not score a touchdown, you lose the game. It doesn't matter how many stars you collect along the path, you lose the game. Now it's going to tell you whether you're a rookie, pro, all-pro, superstar, Hall of Fame. So that's kind of where the beat your high score comes in. But the first 2 are losses. If you do not score a touchdown, you lose the game. If you do score a touchdown before time runs out and before a couple other things that we're going to get to, you win the game. So if you win the game and no more than 2 power-ups were used, and we'll get to that in a little bit, then you're an all-pro. If you win the game and no more than 3 power-ups were used, and the path that you took to the end zone included touching 3 of the 5 stars, you're a superstar. And if you win the game and you use no more than 2 power-ups and your path touched 4 out of the red stars, then you're a Hall of Famer. This is very tough to do, but I wanted to give you all a challenge, something to shoot for. So let's go over the player sheet, because it looks like a lot, but it's a pretty simple game. So at the very top, you have your field, and this is where you're going to be using your player to move and navigate throughout the field to try to score a touchdown. Defenders are going to be added to this field in order to halt your progress and to stop you. This area is the defense check. It's going to determine how many defenders get added to the board. This 2 correlates to this column. I call this column a 10-yard area. This 3 correlates to these 2 columns. Once again, these make up a 10-yard area, so on and so forth. So for this one, we're going to be adding 2 defenders, 3 defenders, so on and so forth, 4 defenders, and then 5 defenders. We're going to go across the board as we move throughout the field. So this defense check just gives you a little summary breakdown of what you need to do and how many defenders you need to add to the board. Up here you have a round structure, so you don't forget. We're going to roll the dice. You're going to use 3 out of the 4 of them. You're going to resolve the dice in a particular set of order. Then you're going to check to see if any new defenders need to get added to the board. And then you're going to do a clock check to see if you've won or lost the game. The clock check is just one way that you can lose the game. If at the end of your turn, all these blocks have been checked, all the squares have been checked, and you have not scored a touchdown, you lose the game. Dice converter is a way to mitigate the dice. If you get stuck, you can use movement points to move diagonally or to jump over defenders. This game, the basic set of movement is orthogonally only. Left, right, up, and down. There is no diagonal movement unless you use this dice converter or a power-up, which we'll get to in a second. The next section is the scoreboard. This is going to come in at the very end of the game to see how well you did and whether you won or lost. And the last section is the power-ups. These are your special abilities. Let's go through them. The first one is Pumped Up. Anytime your group of rolled dice includes lightning bolt, add 1 lightning bolt. Okay? So, actually, let's go over the setup of the game and a round, and then I'll show you how all these work. So at the very start of the game, you're starting out in this start. You don't have a particular space. It could be any one of these. You're starting out in the start end zone. You need to look down and see how many defenders to add to the board. So this is the 10-yard area. You look directly beneath this column, and you need to add 2. So I'm going to roll a d6. And that's a 2. So I can choose whether I want to put cross off this 2 or this 2. I'm going to go ahead and do this one. And that was my first defender I added, so he's blocked that space. The next one is a 5. So that makes it kind of hard to get the star. Let's go ahead and block this one. So I've added the defenders. That's how you start the game. It's as simple as that. That's the setup. Okay, so we're going to go to our round structure. It's the beginning of round number 1. We're going to roll the dice. So you're going to take your 4 dice, and you're going to roll them. I'm going to change them up a little bit just to make them what I want for illustration purposes. These are the 4 options you have on the die. A shield means you have to add a defender to your 10-yard area or the one that you're about to go into. We'll go over those rules. A green arrow simply means you get to move 1 space orthogonally. A lightning bolt means you get to cross off and start charging one of your special abilities. Special abilities cannot be used until all the circles are marked off. So one lightning bolt is going to allow you to mark off 1 circle. Once you have all circles marked off, this power up called Juke Move has been charged. I can then use it at any time. I can use it during the rolling dice phase. I can use it during resolving dice phase. I can use it during the defensive check and the clock check. When I use it, I simply mark the lightning bolt saying I've used it. All power-ups are one-time use only throughout the game. We'll go over those more here in a second. The last dice is the clock dice, and that's going to advance, and that just means you're going to check off one of the boxes, and that's going to help advance the game. It's a timer. So you're going to roll the 4 dice, and then you're going to select 3 of the 4 to use. So let's say I don't want to use the clock one because I don't want the game to end that quickly. So put that aside. There's a particular order that you have to resolve the dice in. You always have to add defenders first to the board, and then you can use your good player dice. You can either do a move first and then a lightning bolt, or you can use a lightning bolt and then a move. These 2 are in no particular order, but they just have to come after defenders have been added to the board and before the clock has been resolved. The clock is the last thing to get resolved, the last dice to get resolved. So let's say those are the 3 I picked. I have to add a defender to the board. I'm going to roll the dice, and it's a 4. So I have this option and this option. I'm going to go here. You'll notice that there are no 6s If you roll a 6, congratulations, you don't have to add a defender to your 10-yard area. Let's say both 2s have been marked off. If you roll another 2, congratulations, you don't have to mark off a 10-yard, you don't have to put another defender on the board. So as you fill the squares, less defenders are going to be added to the board, but that's also a way that you can lose the game. That's the second way that you can lose the game. The first game is if the clock runs out. The second game is if a whole 10-yard area gets filled by either defenders, stars, or paths. And we'll go over that more here in a second. So, here's my 3 dice. I added the defender to the board. And now it's my choice which one of these I want to do first. It doesn't really matter. Let's say I'm going to use the lightning bolt, so I get to charge up one of my special abilities. So I'm starting to fill speed boost, which lets me move 2 spaces orthogonally, but I can't use it until it's fully charged. Once it's fully charged, you don't have to use it right then. You can bank it and save it for a future turn. And now I get to move, so I need to enter the board from the start. So I'm gonna go to 3. And all I do is make a line and then a circle in the middle of the number. So now I am in that space. Okay. So we've rolled the dice. We've resolved the dice. Now we have to do a defensive check. If you end your turn on a column that has a D above it, that means you need to do a defensive check right now at that in step 3 of the round. So I ended not in a D column, so I don't have to do a defensive check. But let's say for illustration purposes, I had another movement, and I ended my turn. I started here. I started in one column and ended my turn in this D column. I need to do a defensive check in the next column because I'm starting to get closer. The defenders are starting to rush at me. So I need to roll 3 d6s and add them to the board. So let's go ahead and do that. So it's a 6. That's my first defender. No defender was added. A 2. So let's mark this off. And then a 3. Well, I don't want to mark this one off because remember I can only move orthogonally unless I use a special ability. So I'm hoping I'm going to mark off this one, so hopefully I can make my way, or maybe I can even do this. I like to hit that star. Okay. So that was step 3, the defensive check. Step 4 is the clock check. You check to see, have you marked off all the squares? If you have, you check to see if you scored if you scored a touchdown. If you haven't, you lost the game. If you have, you proceed to final scoring to see how well you did. So we haven't marked off any, so I'm still good. So now we rinse and repeat. We go back to rolling the dice. Okay, let's say for illustration purposes, this was my roll. I don't want 2 clocks getting used up because that's going to advance the game closer to my death. So I'm going to take one away. These are the 3 dice I'm going to use. You always have to add defenders to the board first. Then you do any good player dice. And then finally, you do the clock dice. So adding a player to the board. Since I'm in this D column, defenders aren't going to swarm me here because no matter where I put one, it doesn't affect me. So once I'm in this D column, you're always going to add defenders to the next 10-yard area because I'm about to enter here and they're going to swarm me. So I'm going to roll a d6. It's a 6. I don't have to do anything. Let's say I rolled a 5. That's where the star is. You never mark off a star with a defender. Congratulations, this is treated like a roll of a 6. And there's 5 of them throughout the board. So you never mark off a star area even if you roll it. Okay? So that's my roll. So I added my defender. I get to move. I'm going to move here. And then I can either resolve the clock dice. Remember, I can use power-ups at any time. I'm gonna use an example. The only one I'd be able to use right now would be Juke Move because it's fully charged, and that was once again just for illustration purposes. In order to get them charged, you have to roll lightning bolts and start charging them. But let's say I had Hurdle completely charged. It says you may move through a defender. What does that mean? I'm here. There's a defender here. There's a defender here. If I use that special ability, I'm jumping over them. So I can go here, or I can go here. It's only orthogonally. If there was a defender here, I cannot move here. So Hurdle, if you're jumping over them, you would just draw a line. 1, 2. Okay. Let's say I resolved all my dice. It's now the defensive check. I did not finish in the D column, but I entered a new 10-yard area, and I have not populated the defenders. So once again, I need to roll three d6s and add them to the board. Okay, so I'm just gonna do this. Normally you would roll for them, but I just need to use this as an example. In this example, if that's what I roll for my defenders, the only way to get out of this is to move diagonally. You can never backtrack. You can never go to where you have been, or I could move diagonally backward. You can never backtrack. You can only move up, down, or towards the goal. So the only way I would get out of this is if I had a diagonal movement, which is a juke move, or there's one that's called run it back. You may use a previously spent power-up. So I've already hurdled one guy. So let's say this was completely charged. Or actually, I would have already used this one because I already hurdled one. Let's say this one was completely charged. I would mark the lightning bolt to say I'm about to use it, and then I look to see which ones have already been spent. And so I have my options are either a juke move to move diagonally, which would work in this situation, or a hurdle, which I can move through a defender. So I'm going to say I'm going to move diagonally so I can get closer to that star, although I could have hurdled him and gone here and then try to get over here and with some more movement. Let's say you get stuck and you have no power-ups handy that you can use, and you're rolling movement dice, and it's just it's wasting because you can't move diagonally and you don't have a power-up to help you. I have this dice converter which you can use once per game. Instead of wasting those movements, you can start to fill up these arrows. 1 dice per arrow. Once it's filled up, then you can either move diagonally or you can hurdle someone. This is a 1 use per game, and it's going to help you if you do get stuck. It's going to help you get out of that situation, hopefully, and give you time to fill up some of your other power-ups. So let's go through some of the power-ups now that we've seen a little bit of the gameplay. Pumped up, anytime your group of rolled dice includes a lightning bolt, add 1 lightning bolt. So once this has been activated, this applies. What's a group of dice? At the start of your turn, you're going to roll. This is considered a group. If you get a lightning bolt in that group, you're considered to have 2 lightning bolts now because you have 1 plus the one that you get from pumped up. If you had this, you're considered to have 4 lightning bolts. Now, if you only use these 3, then you have 3 lightning bolts. If those are the 3 that you go with. So you have 1, 2, and then this pumped up is going to give you another one. So that's powerful to get multiple power-ups charged, but it's also it costs the most to get it energized so that you can actually use that ability. And this ability is for the rest of the game. All of these are one-time use. This applies to the rest of the game as long as you've activated it. Juke move,